Hello and welcome into a victorious Locked On Wolves post-game podcast. We're going to break down exactly how the Wolves collapsed up 12 with under 3 minutes to play to allow this game to go to overtime, and then what they did in overtime to win this thing. The Wolves are going on to Game 5 in Denver on Tuesday. It's all coming on the show. Welcome in. You are Locked On Wolves.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. Today's episode is brought to us by our friends at Prize Picks. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code LOCKEDON. That's prizepicks.com, promo code LOCKEDON. Happy Monday, everybody. It's a victory Monday. The Timberwolves have finally won a playoff game. They go to Game 5 in Denver on Tuesday. This is the post-game podcast. First, right off the bat, though, a big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Of course, Locked On Wolves is free and available everywhere, including YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. You can also follow on Twitter at Locked On T-Wolves and also at Beecken. That's with two B's, two E's, C-K-E-N. All right, the headline, the Timberwolves have forced to Game 5. But I think what most people want to there's two things everyone wants to talk about. I think both nationally and locally. I'm generalizing, but the headlines are the Wolves are forcing this Game 5, and Anthony Edwards is amazing. That's kind of the headline. Next after that is what an epic collapse by the Wolves at the end of the fourth quarter. And let's not overlook the mini version of that in overtime as well, because basically the same thing happened again in a condensed time frame. And I kind of want to start there. I want to start at the end, and we're going to talk about Ant's greatness, and we're going to spend some time on that. That's part of the close of this game. So I want to start with what happened down the stretch, just kind of like not completely relive it blow by blow, because do we really want to? But I think it's important to talk about exactly what happened. But the cliff notes of the first part of the game, like sluggish first half for both teams. The Wolves were down, I think, 4 at halftime. It was Denver's biggest lead. The Wolves led for a good portion of the first half. Bad close to the first half. Much better third quarter, not quite as good as the Game 2 third quarter was back in Denver when they won that quarter, 40-15. This was a plus 10 in the third quarter. The fourth was it was all Wolves early. It looked like they were going to put Denver away. In fact, Minnesota was up by 12 with 2 minutes and 50 seconds left after that Anthony Edwards kind of ridiculous turnaround from just inside the arc on the left side of the floor. And it just kind of felt like, okay, maybe not quite a dagger, but you're up 12 with 2:50 to play. And then it's just like the wheels completely come off down the stretch for the Wolves. And there's a couple of, the quick blow by blow is Jokic makes a 3. Wolves take a quick shot on the other end. Towns misses a 3. Porter Jr. makes a couple of really difficult threes consecutively. So now all of a sudden they've got 9 points in a minute and 20 seconds. It's now a 3-point game with a minute to play. Conley turns the ball over. Jokic comes down, makes a shot to make it a 1-point game. Then Gobert gets blocked at the rim by Porter Jr. Nuggets come down after a timeout. And Towns fouls Jokic, which, by the way, that was the Towns foul on Jokic was letter of the law. Sure. He impeded his movement, whatever. Show me another 1-point playoff game foul call in the last 15 seconds like that. That was an absurd call, and whatever. Anyways, Jokic makes 1 of 2 free throws to tie the game. And by the way, this is another thing that is easy to overlook. What if Jokic makes both those free throws? Then we're only talking about this being an epic collapse and Denver scoring the final 13 points, because I don't think the Wolves ran then just a completely hopeless possession out of a timeout on the other end of the floor. I want to talk about my coaching gripes here in just a moment, but I want to quick talk overtime first. In overtime, the Wolves allowed Denver to score first. It's a little back and forth. The Wolves take the lead for good on a Nickeil Alexander-Walker corner 3 at the 3:09 mark in overtime. Towns fouls out on the other end after kind of a little nudge in Jokic's back. It was a bad pass, probably a turnover anyway, but Towns, of course, did push Joker a little bit, gets fouled out. Something that I thought was really important that is easily overlooked is immediately after that. The Wolves are only up by, I think, 1 at this point. Towns is fouled out. And I don't remember who shot the ball for Denver, but Alexander Walker goes up and tips the potential offensive rebound away from Nickeil Jokic. Remember, this is a small Wolves team now with no Towns. So Towns isn't on the floor. It's Gobert trying to rebound. Alexander Walker's in there. Ant's in there. Alexander Walker tips it away from Jokic to Ant. Then on the other end of the floor, Alexander Walker gets the pass in the left corner and hits another three. So 2 threes on consecutive possessions, sandwiched around the Towns foul out, the 6th foul, the disqualification. And then the Nickeil Alexander Walker tipping the rebound to Ant, which was a really significant play. And then on the other end, Rudy gets called for a foul. It's overturned after a challenge. Nickeil Alexander Walker draws an offensive foul, I believe, on Aaron Gordon. So in essentially a 5-possession sequence, you're talking 2 Alexander Walker threes, tipping the rebound away from Jokic to Ant, and then drawing an offensive foul. Unbelievable how big of a stretch that was for Alexander Walker in a series that I've been talking about constantly. Denver just has better role players. They're showing up. The Bruce Browns, the Kentavious Caldwell-Popes, those guys are outplaying the Taurean Princes, obviously the Jordan McLaughlin's, Jalen Noel's, even Kyle Anderson for much of this series. And finally, Nickeil Alexander Walker, who, by the way, has done a good job on Jamal Murray for the most part. Like, we're not sitting here talking about Jamal Murray. He had 19, but it took him 21 shots to get it. He was cold early. Alexander Walker was really good defensively, and he was good in some of the previous games of the series too, when Jamal Murray still just went off. But Alexander Walker was phenomenal. And then another mini collapse. The Wolves are up 7 with 1.5 minutes to play. And Denver quickly gets it down to a 1-point game with 30 seconds. And the Wolves needed an Anthony Edwards dagger to put away the Nuggets. So let's see, 7-point game. The Nuggets call timeout with 1:29 to play. Jamal Murray makes a shot. Conley misses an open pull-up 3. I didn't have a problem with the shot. He misses it. Jamal Murray comes down, makes another bucket. It's a 3-point game. Gobert travels on the other end. And now Denver has the ball down 5. Jamal Murray makes another shot. So this is kind of when I'm sorry, after the Gobert travel, it was Jokic at the rim to make it a 1-point game. So now 11 seconds to play. And again, Chris Finch, we'll talk about this in a second, doesn't call a timeout. Thankfully, Ant comes down, hits a dagger step back 3 over Aaron Gordon to make this a 4-point lead and ultimately what was a 6-point win for Minnesota after Conley hit a couple of free throws, So let's quickly talk my biggest coaching gripes at the end of this game. And there's a much larger offseason conversation to be had about Chris Finch, pros and cons, and does he maintain his job and like all that stuff. There's a lot of time to unpack that. Probably very soon. But in this game specifically, the timeout management, which I said just the other day on the show, at some point last week, how much better he's been this year with timeout management. And I know most coaches have an assistant assigned to managing timeouts or assigned to saying like, hey, we should take one here. The analytics say to take one here, or this is a spot where we normally take one. I don't know how that works on the Wolves bench exactly. But Chris Finch had 2 timeouts in the 4th quarter when the Nuggets went on a 12-0 run to finish this game. And I'm not saying call it after the first 3. I maybe don't even call it after the second 3 because honestly, I've always been I think coaches sometimes are a little too trigger happy with those. Michael Malone always calls timeouts at the right time. Chris Finch last year got just lambasted after not calling timeouts in the Memphis series when he should have. And that was one of his biggest failings in that series, was just not stemming the tide. I think after that Michael Porter 3, when it's a 6-point game with 2:05 to play, call a timeout. Absolutely. After the second Michael Porter 3, when it's a 3-point game with 1:20 to play, call a timeout. You've got 2. If you have 1, fine, pocket it. You might need it late game. You figure the odds are still in your favor to win this game. The win probability is 99.3% or something, up 12 with 3 minutes to play. So I get it. You're probably still going to win. Pocket that timeout if you have 1. But he had 2 timeouts. So when you're up 6 and you've given up 6 points in 45 seconds, a 6-0 run in 45 seconds, call your timeout, up 6 with 2 minutes to play. Okay, you didn't there. But with 1:30 to play, after another crazy 3 from Michael Porter Jr., they've scored 9 points in the last 1:20, a 9-0 run on 3 straight 3-pointers. You're up 3 with 1:30 to play. Call timeout. What about after Nickeil Jokic makes it a 1-point game with 48 seconds to play? And on your last 2 offensive possessions, you had Nickeil Alexander Walker miss 3 and a Mike Conley turnover. Now you're only up 1. You've just given up 11 straight points in just over 2 minutes. Call your timeout. You have 2 left. You're not going to be able to use the last 2 anyway. Instead, Gobert gets blocked at the rim. The Nuggets come back down. Towns commits the foul. Jokic hits 1 of 2 free throws, and it's a tie game with 12 seconds. Now you call a timeout. Chris Finch still has one in his pocket at the end of regulation. That was a huge miss. Then in overtime, I would say the same thing happened. Chris Finch again doesn't call timeout. A couple of different times. I believe, did they finish with a timeout with 2 timeouts in their pocket? I believe they did, actually, in overtime. I don't think the Wolves, they called one to initiate the challenge with 2 minutes to play. That's the only timeout they called. You get 2 timeouts in overtime. Finch did not call a timeout other than to challenge the Gobert foul call on Jokic. So when the Nuggets make it a 3-point game with 1 minute to play, I'd probably call a timeout there. Instead, Gobert travels on the other end. When Jokic makes a layup to make it a 1-point game with 30 seconds to play, call a timeout. Instead, Anthony Edwards hits a dagger step back 3. I mean, like, everybody on the floor knew what Ant was going to do. He was going to try and score. It was just a matter of, is he going to drive and try and the step back where he got stripped at the end of regulation? Is he going to try and get all the way to the basket? Is he going to shoot the 3? And yes, they scored. But the previous 3 times that they did that, they didn't score. And yet still their ATOs have been decent. This continues to be one of the ways that I defend Chris Finch is he calls really good plays out of timeouts. When this team actually runs a set offense, plays are pretty good. The sets are pretty solid. I don't know why he didn't call a timeout there either. And it worked in their favor, and they won by 6, and Ant hit the dagger 3. I get it. But call a timeout there, Chris Finch. I just don't get that. All right. A couple more observations from this game, including some of the late game offense stuff, and then overall categories like how the Wolves won this thing. We'll look at individual studs and duds here next as well. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our title sponsors over at Prize Picks. If you'd taken Nikola Jokic over on points, you'd have been in great shape in this game. Actually, probably Anthony Edwards as well, I'd bet. If you're not familiar with Prize Picks, it's super easy to play. Just go to Prize Picks and pick 2 to 6 players, and if they'll score more or less than their Prize Picks projection, you can win up to 25 times your money on any entry. You're not competing against other people. It's just you versus the projections available. Prize Picks offers projections on any sport that you watch. This includes the NBA, as well as Major League Baseball, a few weeks underway, NHL throughout the playoffs. The Wild are locked in a battle against the Dallas Stars, any college sports, really anything. You can make your entry in less than 60 seconds. It really is that easy. Download the Prize Picks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code Locked On. If you deposit $100, Prize Picks will give you $100. If you deposit $50, they'll give you $50. Don't forget to enter the promo code Locked On at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. Today's episode is also brought to us by our friends over at Nissan. Nissan's most electric player of the week is brought to you by the all-new, all-electric 2023 Nissan Ariya. Once again, the most electric player of the week for the Wolves has to be Anthony Edwards. I mean, we talked on Friday about his stats so far in the series. You can add this game to his ultra successful first-round series. In this game on Sunday night in Game 4 against the Nuggets, Ant had 34 on 12 of 27. He was 5 of 12 outside the arc. Added 6 rebounds, 5 assists, 3 blocks, 2 steals, only turned it over twice, was second on the team in plus-minus, and the aforementioned dagger three-pointer to put the Wolves up by 4 with about 10 seconds to play in overtime. Anthony Edwards was absolutely electric in this game, just like the Nissan Ariya. He was also, as he always is, stunningly and elegantly powerful, just like the Nissan Ariya, and he also has the perfect crossover, just like the 2023 Nissan Ariya. The 2023 Nissan Ariya packs pin you to your seat power and premium intelligence all-in-one EV, the all-new, all-electric 2023 Nissan Ariya, the EV for people who love to drive. Shop now at nissanusa.com. Reminder, the rest of the week here on Locked On Wolves, of course, will further break down this game. What was this? Game 4, I guess. Game 4 victory. On Tuesday's show, we'll get you ready for Tuesday night's game. What might change, what adjustments might happen. The history of teams that are down 3-0 is, of course, we'll call it daunting if you're a Timberwolves fan and supporter. But we'll break all that down. It's a big week ahead, of course. So the Wolves keep winning. we're gonna have a lot of fun with postcasts and continuing to see if the Wolves can defy the odds here on the show. So again, a big thank you for making us your first listen each and every day. All right, a couple of additional observations here from the game. Let's start here. So I talked a little bit at the end of the last segment about the Wolves' late game offense, and what kills me is that, like, late in the fourth quarter when the Wolves were not calling timeouts, which I've already kind of exhausted that, they come out first offensive set of overtime after giving up a bucket to the Nuggets. They run a big pick and roll, I think it was, and got a dunk for Gobert, like on a good pass from Towns. Like, why are we not calling timeout to then call plays throughout the end of the fourth quarter? Like why is why did we wait until the overtime break, the quarter break between fourth quarter overtime, to call an actual play? And it's just crazy. Like, I thought, on the TNT broadcast, I thought that Grant Hill sometimes is Captain Obvious with his analysis, as many analysts are. I'm not totally singling him out, but like, he said that, or he was saying in the fourth quarter, as it was happening, like, why aren't they running anything? He was mostly right. Like, they're pretty much running, like, flattening out, running ISOs for Ant, which is generally not a bad play call. But like the last possession of regulation, when the Wolves did call a timeout, they also didn't call anything out of that timeout except for an Ant ISO. Denver completely loaded up on Ant, guarded him with two guys, and did a good enough job shading away from the corner that Conley wasn't entirely open either. Like, Ant could have swung it to Conley, but Conley would have had to swing into that corner. And I don't remember who was standing in the right corner, but it would have been two passes before they got an open shot. Instead, Ant gets stripped. He's lucky he wasn't stripped a second earlier, or else you're looking at a Denver, buzzer beater attempt from the wrong side of half court if you're on the Wolves. So I don't understand the lack of a play call there, or why they could have just called timeout a few possessions earlier and just kind of reset and said, okay, hey, like, even if the play call is, we're going to get Ant an isolation look, at least make it creative to get him off a dribble handoff or something where you're forcing a switch. The Wolves did some of this in the third when they retook the lead and kind of gained a little bit of breathing room, very minimal breathing room by a couple of possessions. They started hunting Jokic. They started hunting switches. They tried to get Gordon out of actions and try and take advantage of primarily Jokic, but also Jamal Murray. Like, hey, can we get Murray guarding Towns? Can we get Conley, with the ball and Jokic covering him? Can we just get Gordon away from all this ball screen action and get mismatches? And like, that seems so simple. And it's something that obviously should have happened with more frequency sooner in the series, or even in this game in particular. That stuff all went away in the fourth quarter. It's like they just said, you know what, Ant's good enough. Let's see what happens here. And that's, other than the timeout thing, that's my other biggest gripe. And it's related, of course, because if you call timeout, you reset, of course, other than that last possession of the regulation, which was not out of a timeout, and it was not successful. It was a disaster. You didn't even get a shot off. So I didn't care for that either. And this is this is also such a weird game for this reason. Like, if you look at this, and if I told you, you could probably play this game with any game, but this kind of was running through my mind at the end. If I told you that Joker scores 43, Kyle Anderson leaves the game injured. We haven't even talked about that. He got hit in the face by Ant in the second half and left the game injured, didn't come back. Karl-Anthony Towns fouls out. Taurean Prince goes 1 for 8. Conley's your second leading scorer. Like, if I told you all those things, you'd be like, oh yeah, the Wolves lose this game. Well, Minnesota was actually like a +5 on the glass. They won the rebound battle. They were tied in turnovers. They had an edge in free throw attempts. They shot better than the Nuggets in every category. It was a tie in points in the paint. So this was a relatively even game. I mean, obviously it went to overtime, but in general, the Wolves played well. Like, both teams were sluggish in the first half. And I kind of left the first half thinking, all right, this is not good. Like, the Wolves closed the first half miserably. They should be the ones playing with the hair on fire. Denver didn't seem like they really wanted to be there either, which was the Wolves' only saving grace. And then it took Denver until midway through the fourth quarter, really late in the fourth quarter, to completely wake up. And at that point, it's like the Wolves were already thinking like, okay, we're going to Denver Tuesday. It was just such a weird game in that regard. But the Wolves did well enough in all those key categories that often give them trouble. The biggest issue being the Towns foul trouble, which, by the way, Joker picked up 2 fouls right away in the first quarter, finished with only 3 personals in this game. Aaron Gordon again fouled out, but he played 43 minutes. Cat fouled out in 36 minutes. That was the biggest issue for the Wolves, was the Karl-Anthony Towns foul trouble, plus the Anderson injury. because that meant you were closing this game with, yeah, you have Rudy, but you're having to close with Taurean Prince as your 4. And Prince was not good in this game. Um, like obviously no Jaden McDaniels, obviously no Naz Reid. Now you're no Karl-Anthony Towns, no Kyle Anderson. You're relying on Taurean Prince to play the 4. And, it worked out obviously, but it got a bit dicey after Towns fouled out, right? Like after Towns fouled out, the Wolves are up 7 and this got down to a 1-point game again. So I don't know. All that to say, like there were so many weird things that happened in this game, but ultimately, game 5 on Tuesday, right? All right, let's close with individual studs and duds. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at Ultimate Basketball GM. Ultimate Pro Basketball GM is the coolest game that I played in a long time. I've always thought I could be a great NBA GM. As it turns out, it's not all that easy. If you've had the same thought and have fantasized about managing your own basketball franchise, go and download Ultimate Pro Basketball GM right now. The game allows you to manage every strategic aspect of a franchise, playing through seasons and leading your franchise and fans to glory as you build a historic dynasty. In the simulation, you're responsible for dealing with challenging personalities, of course, players and coaches, plus hiring the right coaches and assistants, trading and training players, making draft picks, navigating your franchise through free agency, through the draft, and all the ups and downs of multiple seasons. It all comes in a challenging and realistic game world. Ultimate Pro Basketball GM is completely free and playable offline. You can play on the go as you want and when you want to. We do have a league with Locked On NBA hosts, and you can bet that is ultra competitive. Locked On Wolves listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo Locked On in the game store. Make sure to check it out. Download the game. Just visit probasketballgm.com. Scan the code if you're watching on YouTube right here in the corner of your screen, or you can look it up on the app stores. That's probasketballgm.com. Ultimate Basketball GM. Start your dynasty today. All right, individual studs and duds from this one. For the Wolves, obviously Anthony Edwards was the best player on the floor for the Wolves again in this one. Was really, really good. There were some ill-advised shots. There was the turnover at the end of regulation that thankfully did not burn the Wolves. And he did shoot 12 of 27. Like, it's not great, but he made 5 threes. That made his night efficient enough. He only got to the line 6 times, which I thought was nuts. I know he shot 12 threes, only 15 twos, but he shot out a couple more trips to the line. He finished with 34 on 12 of 27 shooting, 5 of 12 on threes, 5 of 6 at the line, 6 rebounds, 5 assists, 2 turnovers, 3 blocks, and 2 steals in this game. Another couple of spectacular blocks. One of his 2 turnovers was that one at the end of regulation. Like a clean game for Ant. And again, I thought the shot selection was good. I thought the defense was okay. Now, I think it was right before the dagger 3, actually, in overtime. I think it was that possession. There were a couple possessions where Ant did the thing where a shot goes up and he's not the one shooting it, but it's the Andrew Wiggins thing, Andrew Wiggins in a Wolves uniform thing, where you linger on the perimeter, you don't get back, you don't crash the glass, you just kind of hang out. Ant did that, and I forget who the other Wolves player that did it was. It might have been Rudy, where they're both kind of lingering at the three-point line. The Nuggets come back, get an easy bucket the other way, and then, of course, Ant saves the day by hitting that 3 anyway. But those types of plays are still happening too much, and I don't understand it. It's like they just get caught ball watching. They're waiting for a kick out on an offensive rebound, I guess. But, like, I mean, it just, you can't get caught in no man's land. And how often do the Wolves get an offensive rebound and reset? It's so often. The Wolves had 14 offensive rebounds. 3 of them were on one possession by Jalen Nickeil. He just kept missing at the rim. Rudy Gobert had 5, but I think 3 of them were direct tip-ins. Like, you only get an offensive rebound and actually kick it out a couple times a game. So, especially in a play like that, in a big spot like that, you're either getting back or you're crashing, and you probably should just be getting back. So that was an issue for me. There's too much of that still for Ant, but in general, he saved the Wolves season. Like, I mean, there's no two ways about it. The other player that I thought was massive in this game was Mike Conley. 19 points on 7 of 13, 3 of 7 from outside the arc. I missed a couple of threes late, but like, who didn't, as the Wolves were allowing the Nuggets back in this game? He had 8 assists to only 1 turnover. Conley did. Both Conley and Ant were +7 in the plus-minus column. So Conley had 19 and 8. Really good game from him. I'm going to give Rudy Gobert the 3rd stud. Like, Cat was good. He had 17 and 11. The foul trouble wasn't great. He missed some free throws that he typically makes. A little too much stray voltage from Cat. It didn't make any threes. He was fine. Gobert was really good, quiet early. And there was really by halftime, I was pretty frustrated with how Gobert had played. But the second half, as the Wolves built that lead, and then also in overtime, I thought the activity was good there. 14 points, 15 rebounds. He was physical enough, but only had the 4 personals on the game in an overtime game, which is fine. 7 of 14 shooting. You'd like him to be a little more efficient. A couple of blocks for Rudy. But overall was good. He didn't have any free throw attempts, which is weird. But I thought Rudy Gobert played well in this game. Duds, Taurean Prince. Man, he was so good. And was it the end of game 1 that he was really good? Or maybe, oh no, it was game 2 when he started and got into all the foul trouble, but he played really well when he was on the court. And I was calling for him to start in games 3 and 4 still. He had 6 points on 1 of 8 shooting in this game, 1 of 3 outside the arc. He had a 3, I think it was like right before or right after halftime, something like that. Or I guess it wouldn't have been right after halftime. It was like out of a timeout, where he missed a 3, got it right back, made a 3. 3 boards in 23 minutes. Especially if Kyle Anderson, who knows? He was ruled out fairly quickly by the Wolves. Anderson was with an eye and a face thing after getting hit by Ant. I would imagine he's available Tuesday, but who knows? If he's not, you need a ton of Taurean Prince, and he's got to shoot the ball. The Wolves need spacing, which is why I've been clamoring for more Taurean Prince. Yeah, Nickeil Alexander-Walker made a couple threes late, but he was 0 of 3 from deep before he made those final 2 threes from the corner. And Prince has a longer track record of being a better shooter. You need Taurean Prince on the floor. You need him playing well. He was not good in this game. He is my number 1 dud. I would also give one to, I don't know. I mean, I'm going to split it between Jordan McLaughlin and Jalen Noel. They each played 4 minutes. They were 0 of 5 combined from the floor with 3 rebounds, 1 assist. McLaughlin was a -3 in 4 minutes. Noel was a -4. Noel played patty cake with some rebounds, missed a bunch of shots. McLaughlin missed an open corner 3. Just those guys just have not played well. And so Finch went with Austin Rivers. I think he played all the backup guard minutes in the second half, played 11 minutes, was really good. The Wolves were a +8, or Rivers was a +8, I should say, in his minutes. 5 points, knocked down a big 3, had a nice layup, and it just took, I think it was Porter to the basket and dropped him off, scored. So good minutes from Austin Rivers in this game as well. All right. That's all I have for you today. We're going to unpack this thing further Tuesday. Just kind of, I need to take a breath, relook at this thing. What's really a big deal coming into the game Tuesday night? We'll do that on Tuesday. And of course, a big week ahead. Even if the season ends, midweek, there's a ton to get to. So make sure you're following us and subscribe to the show wherever you listen to podcasts. Of course, you can watch on YouTube. You can listen anywhere. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. You can follow on Twitter at Locked On T-Wolves and also at Beecken with 2 B's, 2 E's, CKEN. Of course, the Locked On Wolves podcast is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Remember, the Locked On Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.